The email came with no subject line. Sergeant Walker, this is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed, retired. I commanded your convoy in Ramadi, November 2006. There's something I need to tell you about that day, about the decision I made, about why we left Martinez and Jacobson behind. I know you've hated me for 18 years. I need you to understand why I gave that order. Can we meet, please? Reed. I stared at the email for a full minute, my hands shaking. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed, the officer who'd ordered our convoy to keep moving after our lead vehicle was hit by an IED. The man who'd left 2 wounded Marines in a disabled Humvee while enemy fire intensified around them. The commander whose decision had haunted me for 18 years. Martinez and Jacobson had died waiting for help that never came, and Reed had given the order to abandon them. I'd spent 18 years wanting to confront this man, wanting to demand answers, wanting to know how he could live with himself after making that decision. And now, out of nowhere, he was reaching out, asking to meet, promising to explain. I typed back, parking garage, corner of 5th and Main, midnight, come alone. I wanted him uncomfortable, wanted him off balance, wanted him to feel even a fraction of the vulnerability Martinez and Jacobson must have felt when they realized we weren't coming back. At 11:45 p.m., I was waiting in the nearly empty parking garage. At 11:52, Reed appeared, older than I remembered, thinner, with the kind of weariness that suggested he'd been carrying a heavy burden for years. He stopped 15 feet away, like he was afraid to come closer. Walker, thank you for agreeing to meet. Don't thank me. I'm here because I've wanted to confront you for 18 years. So talk. Explain why you left them behind. Explain why Martinez and Jacobson died alone in that fucking Humvee while you ordered the convoy to keep moving. Reed flinched but held his ground. That's why I'm here, to tell you what really happened that day. The whole truth, not just what you think you know. I know what I saw. IED hit the lead vehicle. Martinez and Jacobson were wounded but alive. You ordered us to keep moving. By the time a recovery team reached them 2 hours later, they were dead. That's what I know. That's what happened. But you don't know why I gave that order. Don't know the context. Don't know what command was telling me over the radio. Then tell me. Make me understand why abandoning wounded Marines was the right call. Reed pulled out a briefcase, opened it to show documents inside. Can I show you something first? Something that's been classified until recently? I nodded, still keeping my distance, still radiating anger. He pulled out pages of radio transcripts and after-action reports. November 14, 2006. Our convoy was transporting supplies from Camp Ramadi to FOB Steel Curtain. 12 vehicles, 43 Marines. I was convoy commander. You were in Vehicle 7. I remember. At 13:42 hours, the lead vehicle, Vehicle 1, hit an IED. Catastrophic damage. Engine destroyed. Vehicle immobilized. Lance Corporal Martinez was the driver. Took shrapnel to the legs and abdomen. Corporal Jacobson was in the passenger seat. Concussion and facial trauma but conscious. The rest of the convoy stopped. Standard protocol. Secure the area. Treat wounded. Call for medevac. I was following procedure exactly as trained. So what changed? Why did you order us to leave them? Reed's face twisted with pain. At 13:47 hours, I received a radio transmission from Battalion Command. They'd been monitoring our situation, and they had intelligence I didn't have. He showed me a document, a radio transcript from that day. Command informed me that we'd been hit by the first IED in a coordinated ambush. Intelligence indicated multiple additional IEDs along the route, with enemy forces positioned to attack once the convoy was fully committed to recovery operations. They told me that if we stayed to recover Vehicle 1, the entire convoy would be trapped in a kill zone, that we'd lose not just Martinez and Jacobson, but potentially dozens more Marines. And they ordered me to move the convoy to a defensive position and call for a specialized recovery team to extract the disabled vehicle. I felt my certainty wavering. That's not what you told us. You just said keep moving. You didn't explain why. Because I had about 30 seconds to make the decision. Because enemy fire was already starting. Because explaining complex intelligence assessments to 40 Marines over combat radio wasn't feasible. I made the command decision and gave the order. So you're saying you had no choice. You were just following orders. No. Reed's voice was firm. I'm saying I had a choice between 2 terrible options. Stay and risk losing the entire convoy, or move to safety and hope the recovery team could reach Martinez and Jacobson in time. I chose the option that protected the most lives, and Martinez and Jacobson died because of that choice. I've carried that decision every day for 18 years. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to reject his explanation. But something in his face, the genuine anguish, the weight of command decisions made me hesitate. Show me the intelligence report. Show me proof that there were additional IEDs. Reed pulled out more documents. Here, after-action analysis. EOD teams found 3 more IEDs along the route we would have taken to secure Vehicle 1, plus enemy positions in buildings overlooking that area. If we'd stayed, command estimates we'd have taken casualties in excess of 20 Marines. I read the reports. They confirmed what Reed was saying. The ambush had been carefully planned. The first IED was meant to fix us in place so the others could be triggered. The enemy was waiting for us to commit to recovery. Why didn't you tell us this at the time? Why let us think you'd abandon them for no reason? Because the intelligence was classified. Because revealing it would have compromised sources and methods. And because even if I'd explained, it wouldn't have changed how you felt. Marines don't want to hear about acceptable losses and strategic decisions. They want their brothers saved, period. Damn right we do. And I understand that. I was a Marine too before I became an officer. I know how it feels to leave men behind. But I was also convoy commander. I was responsible for 43 lives, not just 2. And I had to make the decision that gave the most Marines the best chance to go home. Reed pulled out another document, this one personal, handwritten. This is a letter I wrote to Martinez's mother, and one to Jacobson's father. I sent them 6 months after the incident. Told them the full truth about what happened and why I made the decision I did. Apologized for not being able to save their sons. Took full responsibility for the order. I looked at the letters. They were heartbreaking. A commander explaining to grieving parents why he'd chosen to prioritize other lives over their sons' lives. What did they say? Martinez's mother never responded. Jacobson's father sent back one sentence. I hope you burn in hell for what you did to my boy. And I understood. Still do. If it were my son, I'd feel the same way. But here's what I need you to understand, Walker. That decision destroyed me. I retired from the Marines 3 years later because I couldn't stop second-guessing myself. Couldn't stop wondering if there was a better option I'd missed. Couldn't stop seeing Martinez and Jacobson's faces every time I closed my eyes. I've been in therapy for 15 years. Diagnosed with moral injury. Not PTSD from combat, but trauma specifically from having made that command decision. From knowing I chose to leave 2 Marines behind, even if I did it to save 41 others. Reed was crying now, tears streaming down his face. So yes, you've hated me for 18 years, but I've hated myself too. Every single day. Because even though the tactical decision was correct, even though command approved it, even though every analysis says I made the right call, those 2 Marines still died. And I gave the order that left them behind. I stood there struggling to process this. For 18 years I'd carried anger at Reed, blamed him, hated him, used him as the target for all my rage about losing Martinez and Jacobson. And now he was telling me he'd been carrying the same guilt, that the decision had destroyed him too. The recovery team. Why did it take 2 hours to reach them? Because they had to clear the additional IEDs first. Had to neutralize the ambush positions. By the time it was safe to recover Vehicle 1, Martinez had bled out and Jacobson had succumbed to his injuries. The medical examiner said Martinez might have survived if he'd received immediate treatment. Jacobson probably wouldn't have made it regardless of timing. So your decision definitely killed Martinez, maybe killed Jacobson, but saved potentially 20 other Marines who would have died in the ambush. That's the math. That's the terrible calculus of command. You sacrifice 2 to save 20, and you live with that decision forever. Reed pulled out one more document. This is my resignation letter. Written 3 years after Ramadi. I couldn't command anymore after that decision. Couldn't be responsible for more lives when I knew I might have to make similar choices. So I retired. And I've spent 15 years working with veteran organizations, trying to, atone, make up for it? There's no making up for it. But I tried to do something meaningful with the life I kept living while Martinez and Jacobson didn't. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to reject his explanations and justifications, but I couldn't ignore the evidence in front of me. The intelligence reports, the after-action analysis, the classified communications that proved Reed had been making an informed decision based on the full tactical picture. Did you tell the rest of the convoy? Did anyone else know about the intelligence? My second-in-command knew, Staff Sergeant Coleman. He's the one who argued with me over the radio, said we couldn't leave them. But when I explained the intelligence about additional IEDs, he understood. He supported the decision, even though he hated it. Coleman died in 2013. Heart attack at 46. His widow told me he'd been carrying guilt about supporting my decision. Said he felt like he'd betrayed Martinez and Jacobson, even though he knew tactically we'd made the right call. So the decision destroyed multiple people. Yes, that's what combat does, especially to commanders. We make decisions that haunt us forever, even when those decisions are correct. Reed stepped closer, finally closing some of the distance between us. Walker, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I made a decision that cost 2 Marines their lives. The fact that I saved 20 others doesn't erase that. I'm just asking you to understand that it wasn't callousness, wasn't cowardice. It was a terrible choice made with incomplete information under extreme pressure. And I've paid for that choice every day since. Lost my career, lost my marriage. My wife couldn't handle what the decision had done to me. Lost relationships with my kids because I was so consumed with guilt. The ghosts of Martinez and Jacobson have haunted me for 18 years. I thought about my own 18 years. The anger I'd carried, the hatred of Reed, the certainty that he'd made the wrong decision, and now that certainty was crumbling. Why tell me now? Why reach out after 18 years? Because the intelligence got declassified last year. Because I can finally show people the full context. And because I'm tired of carrying this alone. Tired of being hated by people who don't know the whole story. Tired of hating myself for a decision I'd probably make again, if faced with the same situation. Would you give the same order? Reed thought carefully. Yes. If I had the same intelligence, the same tactical situation, the same responsibility for 43 lives, I'd give the same order. I'd hate myself for it, but I'd do it. Because the math doesn't change. Sacrificing 2 to save 20 is still the least terrible option. But I'd also do what I'm doing now. I'd spend the rest of my life acknowledging what that decision cost. Honoring the memory of the men I couldn't save. Trying to make their deaths mean something. He pulled out photographs. Martinez and Jacobson, young and smiling in their dress blues. I carry these, every day, in my wallet. Martinez and Jacobson, the 2 Marines I left behind. Not so I can forget. So I never forget. So every decision I make, every action I take, is informed by the knowledge of what command decisions cost. I looked at the photos, my friends, my brothers, dead for 18 years because Reed had given an order, but also alive in memory because Reed had never forgotten them, had carried them every day, had let the decision destroy his career and his life because he took responsibility for what he'd done. What do you want from me, Reed? What's the point of this meeting? I want you to stop hating me for the wrong reasons. Hate me because I gave the order. Fine. Hate me because Martinez and Jacobson died, understandable. But don't hate me thinking I was callous or cowardly, or didn't care. I cared so much it destroyed me, and I want you to know that Martinez and Jacobson mattered, that their deaths weren't forgotten or dismissed, that the man who gave the order to leave them has been carrying them ever since. I stood there in that parking garage, all my anger and hatred confronted with context and complexity. I need time, I finally said. Need to process this. For 18 years, hating you has been simple. Easy. Now you're asking me to understand that it was complicated, that you made an impossible choice. That's not something I can just accept in one conversation. I understand. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know the truth. Whatever you decide to feel about me afterward, at least it'll be based on the full story. Reed packed up his documents, preparing to leave. Walker, one more thing. There's a memorial service next month. Annual gathering for the families of Marines killed in Ramadi. Martinez's sister will be there. Jacobson's parents. I go every year. Stand in the back. Pay my respects. If you want to come, if you want to hear from the families about how they've processed what happened, you're welcome. Why would I want to do that? Because they've had 18 years to wrestle with this too, and some of them have made peace with it. Not forgiveness necessarily, but understanding, and hearing their perspective might help you figure out how you feel. Reed walked toward the exit, then stopped. Martinez's last words, according to the recovery team, were tell Walker to take care of his people. He didn't say save me, he said take care of the others. Like he understood even in those final moments that sometimes you can't save everyone. I don't know if that's true or just something the recovery team made up to make everyone feel better, but I choose to believe it. Choose to believe Martinez understood the impossible math of combat, that he'd have made the same decision if he'd been convoy commander. Reed left. I stood in that parking garage for another hour, trying to process what I'd learned. For 18 years, I'd hated Reed, used him as the embodiment of everything wrong with leadership that prioritized mission over people. Now I understood he'd been a person making an impossible choice, that he'd carried the weight of that choice, that it had destroyed him just like it had destroyed me, just in different ways. I went to the memorial service, stood awkwardly among families who'd lost loved ones, heard Martinez's sister speak about how she'd initially hated Reed, but had come to understand over the years that Warforce's impossible decisions, heard Jacobson's mother, not his father, who still refused to attend, talk about how she'd made peace with what happened, how she'd realized that hating Reed didn't bring her son back, and understanding the context at least gave meaning to his death. After the service, I approached Reed. I don't forgive you, but I understand now, and I'm sorry I've hated you for 18 years without knowing the full story. You don't need to apologize. Your hatred was justified based on what you knew, and honestly, I deserve to be hated, deserve to carry this guilt. It's the price of command. Maybe, or maybe we all just carry different pieces of the same tragedy. You carry the guilt of giving the order, I carry the anger of watching it happen. The families carry the grief of loss, and Martinez and Jacobson carried the cost of being in the wrong vehicle at the wrong time. Over the following months, Reed and I stayed in contact. Not friends exactly, but 2 men connected by a terrible day in Ramadi. 2 men trying to make sense of impossible decisions and their consequences. He showed me more of his work with veteran organizations, programs he'd created to help soldiers process moral injury, support systems for commanders struggling with guilt over combat decisions. This is my penance, he explained. I can't bring Martinez and Jacobson back, can't undo the decision, but I can help other people process similar experiences, can prevent other commanders from being destroyed by guilt the way I was. I started volunteering with the organizations too, found that talking about Ramadi, about the convoy, about Martinez and Jacobson helped, not forgiveness exactly, but processing, understanding, acceptance that war creates situations with no good answers, only less terrible ones. Reed died last year, heart attack at 64. At his funeral, I spoke about the convoy, about his decision, about the 18 years he'd carried guilt for making the right tactical call that had the wrong emotional outcome. Marcus Reed saved 41 Marines by leaving 2 behind, I said, and he spent the rest of his life paying for that decision. He never forgave himself, never claimed he'd made an easy choice. He just carried the weight of command and tried to make the lives he'd saved count for something. Martinez and Jacobson died in Ramadi, but Reed died too, just more slowly. The decision that saved so many also destroyed the man who made it. All 3 are casualties of the impossible math of war. Martinez's sister came up to me after the funeral. Thank you for finally understanding, for seeing Dad Marcus as human instead of as a monster. He was never the villain you thought he was. I know that now. Took me 18 years in a parking garage conversation, but I finally understand. I visit their graves sometimes. Martinez, Jacobson, and now Reed. 3 men connected by one terrible day. 2 who died quickly, 1 who died slowly from guilt. And I think about the 41 Marines who made it home because Reed made that decision, who got to see their families, raise their children, live their lives, who exist because 2 Marines died, and 1 commander spent the rest of his life carrying the guilt. It's not justice, it's not fair, it's not even satisfying, it's just war, impossible choices, terrible math, and people trying to live with the consequences of decisions that had no good options. Reed made the right tactical decision. It destroyed him anyway. Martinez and Jacobson died. They're remembered anyway. And I spent 18 years hating before I learned to understand. That's all we have. Understanding that comes too late, but matters anyway.